The desert sun hammered down on the rocky terrain of Afghanistan's Kunar province, as Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez adjusted her position behind the Barrett M82A1 sniper rifle. 3 days of intelligence gathering had led her team to this ridge overlooking a suspected Taliban weapons cache. What they hadn't expected was to find themselves watching a group of Navy SEALs walking straight into an ambush. Maria had been deployed for 8 months with the 75th Ranger Regiment Sniper Division. Born in El Paso, Texas, she grew up hunting with her grandfather in the Chihuahuan Desert, learning patience and precision that would later save countless lives. Her journey to this moment began when she enlisted at 18, driven by a desire to serve after losing her older brother in the Iraq War. The SEALs below moved in perfect formation through the narrow valley, their mission classified but their destination clear. Intelligence reports suggested a high-value target was meeting with local insurgents in the village ahead. What the SEALs didn't know was that Maria's reconnaissance team had spotted at least 40 Taliban fighters positioned in caves and bunkers throughout the area. Through her scope, Maria counted the enemy positions. Machine gun nests carved into the cliff faces, RPG teams hidden behind rock formations, and snipers positioned on rooftops throughout the village. The SEALs were walking into a killing field designed to eliminate an entire squad. Her spotter, Corporal James Chen, whispered coordinates into his radio, trying to reach the SEAL team's communications frequency. The radio crackled with static. The valley's geography created dead zones where standard military communications couldn't penetrate. Maria watched through her scope as the SEAL team leader held up his fist, signaling his men to halt. Something had caught their attention, but they still hadn't spotted the full extent of the trap waiting for them. Maria's training kicked in as she calculated wind speed, distance, and the multiple targets she would need to engage. At 2,200 meters, her Barrett .50 caliber rifle could punch through concrete blocks and armored vehicles. Against human targets, it was devastatingly effective. But even with her skills, the odds were overwhelming. The lead SEAL, a veteran operator with over a decade of experience, sensed something wrong about the village's silence. No children playing, no women hanging laundry, no men sitting in doorways drinking tea. His instincts, honed through countless missions, told him they were being watched. He signaled his team to take cover behind a cluster of boulders, but it was too late. The first Taliban fighter made his mistake by shifting position too quickly. Maria's trained eye caught the movement immediately. Through her scope's powerful magnification, she could see the insurgent raising an RPG launcher, aiming directly at the SEAL team's position. The distance was extreme, the target partially concealed, but Maria had made more difficult shots during her deployment. Her finger found the trigger as she controlled her breathing. The Barrett's reputation as a one-shot, one-kill weapon wasn't just military legend. In the right hands, it could change the outcome of an entire battle. The SEALs below had no idea that their lives hung in the balance of a single trigger pull from a ridge they couldn't even see. The tension in the valley was palpable as both American forces and Taliban fighters prepared for a confrontation that would test every aspect of their training. Maria's heart rate remained steady, her hands firm on the rifle that had become an extension of her own body through months of combat operations. What happened next would become the stuff of military legend, a story told in briefing rooms and barracks around the world. But in that moment, Maria Rodriguez was just a soldier doing her job, using skills learned in the Texas desert to protect fellow Americans in the mountains of Afghanistan. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle beside her would soon announce its presence with a thunderous roar that would echo through the valley and change everything. The Barrett's muzzle flash lit up the ridge like lightning as Maria's first shot rang out across the valley. The .50 caliber round traveled at 2,800 feet per second, covering the 1,200-meter distance in less than 2 seconds. The Taliban fighter with the RPG launcher simply vanished in a cloud of dust and debris, his weapon clattering down the rocky slope. The thunderous boom of the Barrett echoed off the canyon walls, creating a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The SEAL team below immediately hit the ground, their training taking over as they sought cover behind whatever rocks and boulders they could find. Their team leader, Chief Petty Officer Michael "Tank" Thompson, had heard that distinctive sound before and knew exactly what it meant. Friendly sniper on the ridge. Tank shouted into his radio, hoping his voice would carry to his scattered team. The SEALs had been trained to recognize the sound of different weapons, and the Barrett's deep, echoing boom was unmistakable. Somewhere above them, An American sniper was engaging targets they couldn't even see. Maria worked the Barrett's bolt action, chambering another round as Corporal Chen called out new targets. "RPG team 2 o'clock behind the stone wall," he whispered urgently. Through her scope, Maria could see 3 fighters scrambling to set up a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. They had chosen their position well, using an ancient stone wall for cover while maintaining a clear shot at the pinned-down SEALs. The second shot came faster than the first. Maria had found her rhythm, her body moving in perfect synchronization with the massive rifle. The .50 caliber round punched through the stone wall like it was made of cardboard, eliminating the RPG threat before the weapon could be fired. Chunks of ancient masonry exploded outward, creating a deadly spray of rock fragments that sent nearby Taliban fighters scrambling for different cover. Down in the valley, the SEALs began to understand the tactical situation. They were trapped in a natural amphitheater with enemy positions on 3 sides, but someone with a heavy sniper rifle was systematically dismantling the ambush from above. Tank used hand signals to coordinate his team's movement, knowing they needed to take advantage of the confusion Maria's shots were creating. The Taliban fighters were now facing their worst nightmare. Their carefully planned ambush was falling apart as their key weapon positions were eliminated one by an unseen sniper. The psychological effect of the Barrett was as devastating as its physical impact. The massive rifle could punch through concrete walls, armored vehicles, and body armor with equal ease, making no hiding spot truly safe. Maria's third target was a machine gun nest carved into the cliff face across the valley. The gunners had positioned themselves behind sandbags and steel plates, confident their position was impregnable. They hadn't counted on facing a weapon designed to disable light-armored vehicles. Maria adjusted her aim slightly, accounting for the increased distance and the fact that her target was partially concealed. The shot was her most challenging yet. The machine gun nest was nearly 400 meters away, and the gunners were well protected behind their improvised armor. But the Barrett's .50 caliber armor-piercing round was designed for exactly this type of target. The bullet punched through the steel plate like tissue paper, silencing the machine gun and eliminating another major threat to the SEALs below. Corporal Chen spotted movement in the village as Taliban fighters began abandoning their positions. "They're starting to break," he reported quietly. The psychological warfare aspect of sniper operations was working exactly as intended. The surviving fighters couldn't see Maria's position, couldn't predict where the next shot would come from, and couldn't effectively return fire against a target they couldn't locate. Tank realized his team had a narrow window of opportunity. The mystery sniper was systematically destroying the ambush, but Taliban reinforcements would eventually arrive. He signaled his men to begin a tactical withdrawal toward the northern slope of the valley, where the terrain would provide better cover and concealment for their movement. Maria watched the SEALs begin their movement through her scope. She could see Tank's tactical skill as he leapfrogged his men from cover to cover, using the confusion created by her shots to mask their withdrawal. But she also spotted new threats emerging from caves and buildings throughout the village. The Taliban weren't finished yet. Her fourth shot targeted a sniper who had taken position on a rooftop overlooking the SEALs' route of withdrawal. The enemy marksman never knew what hit him as the Barrett's massive round ended his threat permanently. The shot also sent a clear message to any other Taliban snipers in the area about the futility of engaging in a long-range duel with a .50 caliber rifle. The Taliban fighters regrouped faster than Maria had expected. Through her scope, she watched as a new group of insurgents emerged from a cave system on the eastern side of the valley. These weren't the local fighters who had set up the original ambush. Their movements were more disciplined, their equipment more sophisticated, and their tactical awareness far superior. "We've got a problem," Corporal Chen whispered as he observed the new arrivals through his binoculars. "Those guys are foreign fighters, probably Chechen or Pakistani. They know what they're doing." The new group carried advanced weapons including a Dragunov sniper rifle and what appeared to be a Russian-made Cord heavy machine gun mounted on a tripod. Maria shifted her attention between protecting the withdrawing SEALs and assessing this new threat. The foreign fighters were setting up a crossfire that would trap Tank's team in the narrow section of the valley they were currently traversing. She had perhaps 2 minutes before the machine gun would be operational and positioned to cut down the SEALs with devastating effectiveness. Tank saw the new threat developing and made a crucial decision. Instead of continuing the withdrawal, he ordered his team to take defensive positions among a cluster of large boulders. The SEALs were experts at turning any terrain to their advantage, and the rock formation would provide cover while they dealt with the evolving situation. The Dragunov sniper found Maria's muzzle flash and began returning fire. His first shot struck the rocks near her position, sending granite chips flying. Maria immediately recognized the flat crack of the Russian rifle and knew she was now in a sniper duel with a skilled opponent. The Dragunov was accurate to 800 meters, well within range of her position. Maria's fifth shot was aimed at the heavy machine gun team. The Cord 50 caliber machine gun could fire 650 rounds per minute and would massacre the SEALs if it became operational. Her shot struck the weapon's ammunition box, detonating the linked rounds in a spectacular explosion that eliminated the gun crew and destroyed their position. The explosion drew cheers from the SEAL team below, but Maria knew the celebration was premature. The Dragunov sniper was still active, and more Taliban fighters were moving through the village. Through her scope, she could see at least 20 insurgents working their way toward the SEAL's position, using a network of irrigation ditches for cover. Corporal Chen called out new coordinates as another RPG team appeared on a rooftop. "Target 800 meters, two-story building with the blue door," he whispered urgently. Maria acquired the target and fired her sixth shot, the Barrett's massive, round-collapsing part of the building's roof and eliminating the rocket team before they could engage. The Dragunov sniper fired again, this time coming uncomfortably close to Maria's position. The bullet struck a rock outcropping just inches from her head, showering her with debris. She knew she had to deal with him soon, or risk being pinned down herself. Counter-sniper operations required patience, but the SEALs below couldn't wait for a prolonged duel. Tank's team was running low on ammunition after the extended firefight. Each SEAL carried enough rounds for a standard mission, but the intensity of the combat had depleted their supplies faster than anticipated. They needed to either reach an extraction point or find a way to resupply from enemy weapons scattered around the battlefield. Maria spotted the Dragunov sniper through her scope as he shifted positions on a distant ridge. The range was extreme, nearly 2,500 meters, and the target was only partially visible. But the Barrett was capable of accurate fire at that distance in experienced hands, and Maria had proven her skills throughout the deployment. Her seventh shot was the most challenging of the engagement. The bullet had to travel through varying air densities caused by the heat rising from the valley floor, cross a significant wind current between the ridges, and still maintain enough energy to be lethal at the extreme range. Maria calculated all these factors in seconds, her training and experience guiding her aim. The shot connected. Through her scope, Maria saw the enemy sniper's rifle tumble down the rocky slope as the threat was eliminated. The Dragunov's distinctive sound went silent, and the psychological pressure on the SEALs was reduced significantly. They could now move more freely without worrying about precision fire from the opposing ridge. The Taliban fighters in the irrigation ditches were now close enough to threaten the SEALs with small arms fire. Tank organized his team into overlapping fields of fire, using their superior training and equipment to hold their defensive position. But Maria could see more enemy fighters arriving from the surrounding mountains, and she knew the situation was far from resolved. The situation in the valley deteriorated rapidly as more Taliban reinforcements arrived from 3 different directions. Maria counted at least 60 fighters converging on the SEAL's position, far more than her Barrett could handle alone. Through her scope, she watched Tank's team prepare for what appeared to be their final stand among the rocky outcroppings. Corporal Chen worked frantically with his radio equipment, trying to establish contact with any friendly forces in the area. The mountainous terrain continued to block most communications, but he managed to reach a forward operating base nearly 40 kilometers away. "Broken arrow, he transmitted, using the code phrase that indicated American forces were in danger of being overrun. Maria's ammunition was running critically low. The Barrett's 50 caliber rounds were heavy and bulky, limiting how many she could carry on a reconnaissance mission. She had started with 12 rounds and had already fired 7. Each remaining shot had to count if she was going to keep the SEALs alive long enough for reinforcements to arrive. A new threat emerged as Taliban fighters brought up a vintage Soviet-era DSHK heavy machine gun, mounting it on the bed of a pickup truck. The weapon could fire armor-piercing rounds at 600 rounds per minute and had enough range to reach both Maria's position and the SEALs below. If the gun crew managed to get it operational, the tactical situation would become hopeless. Tank saw the technical vehicle moving into position and knew his team was out of time. The SEALs had established a defensive perimeter among the rocks, but they couldn't withstand sustained fire from a heavy machine gun. He made the difficult decision to call for close air support. Even though no aircraft were immediately available in their sector, Maria's 8th shot targeted the DSHK machine gun just as the crew finished mounting it. The Barrett's massive round struck the weapon's receiver, transforming the heavy machine gun into twisted metal and eliminating another major threat. But the effort revealed her position more clearly to the enemy fighters below, who began directing concentrated small arms fire toward her ridge. The intensity of incoming fire forced Maria and Chen to relocate their position. They low-crawled along the ridgeline, dragging the heavy Barrett rifle and their equipment to a new firing position 50 meters away. Bullets cracked overhead as Taliban fighters with AK-47s and PKM machine guns tried to suppress the sniper who had been devastating their attack. From their new position, Maria could see that the SEALs were completely surrounded. Taliban fighters had worked their way behind the rock formation, using the network of irrigation ditches and stone walls. Tank's team was now taking fire from 360 degrees, trapped in an increasingly small defensive circle with dwindling ammunition supplies. Chen finally established contact with a Predator drone operating in a neighboring province. The unmanned aircraft was armed with Hellfire missiles and could reach their location in 12 minutes. But 12 minutes was an eternity in combat, and Maria wasn't sure the SEALs could hold out that long. Against the overwhelming enemy, numbers. Maria's 9th shot targeted a group of Taliban fighters who had positioned themselves to assault the SEALs' rear defensive line. The .50 caliber round struck a large rock that the fighters were using for cover, fragmenting the stone and creating deadly shrapnel that scattered the assault group, but more fighters immediately moved to replace them. The psychological effect of the Barrett was beginning to wear off as the Taliban adapted their tactics. They learned to move in smaller groups, use better concealment, and coordinate their attacks to overwhelm Maria's ability to engage multiple targets simultaneously. The insurgents understood they were facing a single sniper, no matter how skilled, and numbers were on their side. Tank's ammunition situation became critical as his team expended their last magazines in sustained defensive fire. The SEALs began collecting weapons and ammunition from fallen Taliban fighters, adapting to use AK-47s and PKM machine guns against their former owners. Their superior training allowed them to maintain effective fire even with captured enemy weapons. Maria spotted a Taliban commander directing the assault from a position near the village mosque. Taking out leadership targets could disrupt enemy coordination and buy precious time for the arriving drone support. But the shot would be difficult. The commander was partially concealed behind a stone wall and constantly moving as he directed his fighters. Her 10th shot was rushed as the commander started to move to a new position. The bullet struck the wall near his location, sending up a cloud of dust and debris but failing to neutralize the target. Maria cursed silently, knowing she had wasted a precious round when every shot needed to eliminate a threat to the trapped SEALs. The sound of rotors echoed across the valley as 2 Apache attack helicopters appeared on the horizon. Chen's radio calls had finally reached the right people, and the cavalry was coming. But the helicopters were still several minutes away, and Maria could see Taliban fighters preparing rocket-propelled grenades to engage the incoming aircraft. The Apache helicopters approached the valley like mechanical angels of death, their rotors cutting through the desert air with a distinctive whop-whop sound that both sides recognized immediately. Maria watched through her scope as Taliban fighters scrambled to position their RPGs for anti-aircraft fire, knowing that downing even one helicopter would shift the entire battle in their favor. Tank's team heard the approaching aircraft and prepared to mark their position with infrared strobes, visible only to friendly forces wearing night vision equipment. Despite the daylight conditions, the strobes would help the Apache crews distinguish between American and enemy positions in the chaotic battlefield. Below, Maria had 2 rounds left in her magazine and 1 additional magazine containing 5 more rounds. She had to make every shot count as the battle entered its most critical phase. The Taliban fighters were desperate now, knowing that air support would tip the balance decisively against them. Their attacks on the SEAL position intensified as they tried to overrun the Americans before the helicopters could intervene. The first Apache pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Martinez, had been flying combat missions in Afghanistan for 18 months. Through her helmet-mounted display, she could see the tactical situation developing below. The infrared signatures showed friendly forces surrounded by a much larger enemy group, with muzzle flashes indicating intense firefight activity throughout the valley. Maria's 11th shot targeted an RPG team that had positioned themselves on a rooftop with a clear shot at the approaching helicopters. The Barrett's round struck the building's support beam, causing part of the roof to collapse and eliminating the anti-aircraft threat. But she spotted 2 more RPG teams moving into position on different buildings throughout the village. The lead Apache opened fire with its 30mm chain gun, the distinctive buzzing sound filling the valley as hundreds of rounds per minute tore into Taliban positions. The pilot had identified enemy fighters, based on their positions relative to the friendly forces, and began systematically destroying machine gun nests and RPG teams that threatened both the SEALs and the helicopters. Chen coordinated with the Apache crews through his radio, providing real-time intelligence about enemy positions and movements. His elevated position on the ridge gave him a perfect overview of the battlefield, allowing him to direct the helicopter strikes with devastating precision. The partnership between ground observers and air support was working exactly as designed. Tank's team took advantage of the air support to reorganize their defensive perimeter and consolidate their remaining ammunition. The SEALs moved with practiced efficiency, collecting weapons and equipment from their defensive positions while maintaining security against any Taliban fighters who might attempt a final desperate assault. Maria's 12th shot eliminated another RPG team that had been maneuvering to engage the second Apache helicopter. The Taliban fighters were learning to use the village's complex terrain to mask their movements, but they couldn't hide from the Barrett's long-range precision fire. Her position on the ridge provided clear lines of sight to most of the battlefield. The second Apache, piloted by Chief Warrant Officer David Kim, engaged a group of Taliban fighters who were attempting to flank the SEAL position using a dry riverbed. The helicopter's Hellfire missiles struck with pinpoint accuracy, eliminating the flanking threat and sealing off one of the main avenues of approach to the Americans' defensive position. The battle was turning decisively in favor of the American forces, but Maria knew the Taliban wouldn't give up easily. Through her scope, she could see enemy fighters withdrawing toward the mountains, carrying their wounded and salvaging what equipment they could. The ambush had failed, but the insurgents were already planning their next attack. Tank called for a medical evacuation helicopter as his team assessed their casualties. 2 SEALs had been wounded during the firefight, though neither injury was life-threatening. The team's corpsmen worked quickly to stabilize the wounded men while the others maintained security around their position. Maria reloaded her Barrett with her final magazine and scanned the surrounding terrain for any remaining threats. The immediate danger had passed, but Taliban fighters were notorious for leaving behind snipers and improvised explosive devices to target rescue operations. Her job wasn't finished until every American was safely evacuated from the valley. The Predator drone finally arrived overhead, adding another layer of surveillance and firepower to the American forces' capabilities. The drone's cameras provided real-time intelligence about Taliban movements throughout the region, helping to ensure that no enemy reinforcements could approach the evacuation site undetected. Chen established radio contact with the incoming medical evacuation helicopter, providing detailed information about the landing zone conditions and security situation. The pilot would need to know about potential threats, terrain obstacles, and the tactical situation before attempting to land in what had recently been an active combat zone. The medical evacuation helicopter descended into the valley under the protective cover of both Apache gunships, their rotors kicking up clouds of dust that obscured the landing zone. Maria maintained her overwatch position, scanning the surrounding ridges and buildings for any Taliban fighters who might attempt to disrupt the evacuation with sniper fire or rocket attacks. Tank's team moved efficiently toward the landing zone, carrying their wounded comrades and maintaining tactical spacing despite their exhaustion. The SEALs had been in combat for over 3 hours, and their ammunition supplies were nearly depleted. The evacuation couldn't come soon enough, but their professional discipline kept them alert for any final threats. Through her scope, Maria spotted movement in a cave entrance approximately 800 meters from the landing zone. A Taliban fighter appeared briefly, shouldering what looked like an RPG launcher aimed directly at the medical helicopter. Without hesitation, she fired her 13th shot, the Barrett's massive round striking the cave entrance and causing a rockfall that sealed the opening permanently. The medical helicopter touched down as the Apache crews continued their protective overwatch. The aircraft's crew chief and medic immediately began loading the wounded SEALs, while Tank's remaining team members provided security around the landing zone. The entire evacuation process took less than 4 minutes, a testament to the crew's professionalism and experience. Maria and Chen began their own withdrawal from the ridge, carefully moving their equipment and covering their tracks to prevent the Taliban from determining their exact firing position. The Barrett rifle was too valuable to abandon despite its weight, and leaving behind evidence of their presence could compromise future operations in the region. The helicopter carrying the wounded SEALs lifted off successfully, climbing rapidly to gain altitude and distance from any potential ground fire. Tank and his remaining men would be extracted by the second helicopter, which was already approaching the landing zone. The entire rescue operation was proceeding exactly as planned. Despite the earlier tactical complications, Chief Petty Officer Thompson looked up toward the ridge where the mystery sniper had operated throughout the battle. He couldn't see Maria's position, but he knew someone up there had saved his entire team from annihilation. Tank made a mental note to find out who the sniper was and ensure proper recognition was given for actions that went far beyond the call of duty. Maria's final shot came as the second helicopter was loading Tank's team. She spotted a Taliban sniper who had positioned himself to take a shot at the departing aircraft. Her 14th round eliminated the threat just as the helicopter's engines began spooling up for takeoff. It was her last bullet, perfectly placed to ensure the mission's successful completion. The Apache helicopters escorted both evacuation aircraft safely out of the valley, their presence deterring any Taliban fighters who might be tempted to pursue the withdrawing Americans. The Predator drone remained on station to monitor enemy movements and provide intelligence for future operations in the region. Maria and Chen completed their own extraction by linking up with a quick reaction force that had been dispatched from the nearest forward operating base. Their reconnaissance mission had ended up saving the lives of an entire SEAL team, though that hadn't been their original objective when they established the observation post 3 days earlier. The after-action reports would credit Maria with 14 confirmed kills using the Barrett 50 caliber rifle, but the numbers didn't tell the complete story. Her precision fire had broken up a carefully planned Taliban ambush, eliminated multiple heavy weapons that could have massacred the SEALs, and provided covering fire that enabled a successful rescue operation under impossible odds. Tank's team recovered completely from their wounds and returned to operational status within weeks. The mission they had been attempting to complete was eventually accomplished by a different unit, using intelligence gathered during their ill-fated patrol through the valley. The Taliban weapons cache was destroyed, and several high-value targets were captured in subsequent operations. The Barrett rifle that had dominated the battlefield that day was cleaned, inspected, and returned to service with Maria's unit. The weapon had performed flawlessly throughout the engagement, proving once again why the 50 caliber rifle had become legendary among military snipers worldwide. In the right hands, it could indeed change the outcome of an entire battle. Maria Rodriguez returned home after completing her deployment and eventually became a sniper instructor, passing on her skills to the next generation of military marksmen. She rarely spoke about the day in the Afghan valley when her Barrett 50 spoke from the ridge above, but her students learned from someone who had proven that one well-trained soldier with the right equipment could make the difference between mission success and tragedy.